This birth story is from Mary Beth. I asked her permission to share her story, and as I do with every mom, I only share their stories with permission. And I said, do you want me to change your name so that it's anonymous? And she said, no, you can use my name. I'm so proud of my birth story. So I just love that. She was a woman that I was coaching while she was pregnant. And I was telling her all about these things, how you don't have to feel bad in your pregnancy. You can have a great labor, and this is how you handle a contraction, and all these things you're learning right now. And she called me up one day and said, Karen, my coworker's pregnant at the same time of me, and she's having this nausea and morning sickness, and she's coming to work and complaining about it all the time. And she asked me, am I having it? And then yesterday I started having it. In the last couple days, I've been so nauseous, so sick that I don't want to get out of bed, and it's like hitting me. What am I supposed to do? Like, is this normal? Is this normal? We always ask that. So I said, it's normal, but that doesn't mean you have to accept it. It doesn't mean you need to keep it. So I explained, you can reject anything you want. You don't have to receive it. Just because it's normal doesn't mean it's for you. So I said, we prayed. I broke it off of her body, and I started to reframe her perspective and mindset and expectation of what she experienced in her pregnancy. I said, you don't have to experience nausea. I break that off your body, and I just give your body permission to feel great all the way up until the end. And so she called me the next day and said, Karen, it's amazing. I haven't had any nausea at all. And for the rest of her pregnancy, she did not have any nausea or morning sickness. In fact, she felt great all the way up until the end of her pregnancy. That was one of those times where it jumps on her. It jumped on her. Sometimes it happens from a deeper root or a spiritual root or an emotional root, and it's like your body's screaming at you saying, hey, you need to deal with this. Sometimes it's just an expectation or a mindset that we need to shift. And so in her case, she saw her coworker experiencing nausea. She thought, well, that must be what's normal. That must be what I should expect. So her body started having nausea symptoms. So we broke it off, and her body instantly responded with no more nausea and morning sickness. In fact, she worked in a field doing manual labor until like 2 days before she went into labor. Now, that's a tough woman, if you ask me. So you determine the quality of your pregnancy experience. And I'll share with you her birth too, because she's got some great birth stories. In this, her first baby was born. That story was from that pregnancy. She went into labor with him, feeling great, working manual labor, taking care of herself, we just worked so much. I worked with her on having a positive perspective toward birth and pregnancy, that everything happening in your body is a blessing. It's the way God designed it. So she wanted it to just be her and her husband in labor. And so when the contractions started, they started in the morning. Her whole labor was about 29 hours long, and her contractions started to gradually get harder and harder and harder. And I talked a lot about how to handle the contraction, to not tense up. And she said the contractions never got unbearable. I had a really easy labor all day long. They got stronger at night. She slept for an hour or two. She went to the hospital in the middle of the night. She remembers being in triage, and the nurse there was rude to her, trying to jam an IV in after 3 collapsed veins. She was dehydrated, and the nurse is telling her, well, you're not really in labor. They didn't even believe her. They're like, you're not in labor. See that woman screaming and crying? She's in labor. Don't worry, that'll come later. And those contractions that she then experienced with that midwife and that nurse were more painful than any of the other contractions in her labor. So it just confirms that mind-body connection. She said the contractions got more intense. She was checked around 5 centimeters and admitted. And then that midwife, she didn't left. And so a new one came on, and her contractions suddenly felt much better. So during this time, she got in the tub. She said, I experienced supernatural joy. I realized this is what my body is supposed to do. It's working. So she even took naps in the tub. She was falling asleep with the jets on, just kind of lounging in the tub. And she would wake up a little bit at the contraction, then she'd fall back asleep, and she just labored in the tub for hours. Eventually she got out, they checked her, she was 7 to 8 centimeters. So she said, well, I'm getting back in the tub then, that felt so good. And then her new midwife was bringing her popsicles, and she loved popsicles, so she's having all these happy endorphins and emotions. And she gets out of the tub, they check her, and she's fully dilated, 10 centimeters. She was talking and actually laughing in between contractions. She got nervous about transition. She thought, they're gonna get more intense. I don't know if I can handle it. She kept asking them, is this gonna get more intense? Is this gonna get more intense? Because there was no point where her contractions were overpowering, and she thought it must be getting worse. And so she said, am I in transition? And they go, oh honey, you're already past that. And so about 30% of women don't have a discernible transition. She felt overwhelming joy and excitement. She said, I can't believe it's happening. I'm so excited. What does that sound like, ladies? Endorphins, they're the happy drugs. She said she didn't feel the urge to push immediately. She was still feeling contractions, so they waited until she felt the urge to push. Then they broke her water, and when she was pushing, they were coaching her, but it was uncomfortable. She had to push for quite a while, and the baby was kind of putting pressure on that tailbone, and she did end up having a 3rd-degree tear. And so that was no fun, but she remembers saying, I can't do this. If you're saying, I can't do this, I can't do this, reframe your thoughts, reframe your perspective, or have your husband say, you are doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this beautifully. Or, okay, you can't do this, let's get in another position and do something else. So there's some ideas for you. When the baby came out, she said she felt an overwhelming amount of oxytocin rush through her body. She caught the baby herself. She said, it felt like the best moment of my life. When he came out, she said, he was disgusting, but he was perfect. He's so perfect. They're covered in all their amniotic fluid and vernix and blood and everything. And she just goes, he's perfect. He's perfect. Her provider said, when they tried to stitch her up for her tear, they said, put your butt down, put your butt down. They go, you labored like a champ, but you're a wuss when it comes to stitching. She said, well, that didn't hurt. This is real pain, right? So breastfeeding was easy. Baby latched right away. And she said for months after the birth, she said she felt like, I can't believe I did that. If I can do that, I can do anything as a mother. She said it was like the foundation of my strength for being a mother. With the second birth, she had a daughter a year later, and she remembers feeling like mentally she wasn't prepared for this birth. She was struggling with some very emotional, personal family situations that were causing her a lot of stress and anxiety. And she remembers feeling like, I don't think I'm in a good place mentally to birth this baby. Now that's a woman with good discernment, because we know that there's the mind, the heart, the spirit, and the body, and all these things affect each other. So she's realizing, I'm not in a good mental place or emotional place. There's lots of emotions going on, and I don't know if that's going to affect my birth. So she calls me up one day, and we process through stuff. We go through prayers, we forgive, I break off lies, and I say, you are prepared. You've already done this. You had a pain-free birth. And so I just release peace to you. I release peace to her spirit, and we talked about some of the fears she was experiencing. We took them out of her bag, and we said, let's talk about these. We broke off the fears and the lies associated with them. And she said when labor actually kicked in, immediately her thoughts went to, oh yeah, I can do this. I've done this before. It was like muscle memory. It was easier to get the hang of it. The labor came, and she said, if this is the real thing, I can go back to sleep now. Smart girl. Second time moms know when labor starts, go back to sleep. So she laid out on the couch all day and watched movies. Right before she went to bed, though, contractions stopped. She woke up the next morning, and they started again. And I think that's a great way to labor. Let's just take a break and go to bed, and then we'll wake up and finish our labor. Sign me up. Full night of sleep sounds good. So she felt like she was when they decided to go for a walk, and she said she felt like the baby was gonna like fall right out of her. She was so low. The gravity was like pulling her out. A walk is an awesome, very beneficial thing to do in pregnancy. When she got back from the walk, her mom called her, or she called her mom to come over and take her son so that they could go to the hospital. They got there at 11 a.m. in the morning, and every time she had a contraction, her husband would massage her hand. So about noon, the midwife checked her. She was scared that she wouldn't be dilated enough, but she was 6 centimeters, and she was overwhelmed with joy. She said the head was low, there was lots of pressure. They gave her an IV again because she was dehydrated. So ladies, drink your water. And she sat on the birth ball. Her husband massaged her hand. She said, she's like, where's my tub? That worked so well last time. Draw me a hot bath. I'm getting in the tub. So she got in the tub, labored there for about an hour, got out. They checked her. She said at about 3 p.m. she wanted to be checked, and they said, is there any reason you need to be checked? And she said, well, there's a, so they checked her, and there's a slight rim of her cervix, but a bulging bag of fluid, and they were shocked. They were like, you can't possibly be this far along. You're coping really well, because she was still talking and laughing at 9 and 10 centimeters. So this woman's just awake and talking like it's nothing. So at 3:15, 15 minutes later, she's on her hands and knees pushing. She said that there was relief in between the pushes, and the pushing was intense, but she could feel her baby coming down. She felt like her pushing was way more effective in the hands and knees position this time than it was when she was sitting on her tailbone. There was so much pressure, and it hurt in that position. So getting on her hands and knees made it feel much more effective and easier physiologically to push that baby out. She said, I exerted way less energy to push her out. My body did it more than I had to force it. That's key. Let your body do the hard work. So her baby came out while she pushed her out on her hands and knees on the hospital bed. Only 12 minutes of pushing and she said her daughter Mary Kay was born. One more push and the shoulders came out. She got up on her knees, the midwife caught the baby, and they put her up on mom's chest. So Mary Beth had 2 pain-free birth experiences. And when she told me about this, I was so excited, because at that time I hadn't seen a whole lot of other women having them. I'd met women, I'd heard stories, but this proved to me that this was actually teachable. It convinced me that if I can teach this, we can multiply it. If we can get the information out there that birth doesn't have to be painful, it can be joyful and empowering, and pregnancy can be joyful and pain-free and symptom-free too. We can thrive in pregnancy. It just gave me so much joy. She called me up after her birth and said, I was laughing at 9 centimeters. And I said, yay, you did it, you did it. It was so beautiful. She told me that we actually met at a women's conference, and I had been teaching there on supernatural childbirth. It was only 3 months after the birth of my first daughter. And so this was brand new to me, but all I did was simply share my testimony and tell women that this was possible. And she heard me at that conference, and she said, my whole life I believed that childbirth was painful, and that's just how it was. I never knew anything else. I didn't know anything else about it. But when I heard you speak then, it changed my mindset, and I knew I could believe for something different. And I just declare that the same can be true for you, that you can have a joyful, empowering birth and pregnancy, no matter what you've experienced in the past, no matter what you come from. This too is a promise for you. Mary Beth even said, at first I thought it was just something for really spiritual people, like, well, Karen Welton, she must be super spiritual, and so that would happen for her. And she said, I'm not really spiritual. I don't have a lot of encounters with God, so I didn't know if it would happen to me. And after she had her birth, she said, I did it. It happened to me. And she felt so empowered as a woman and as a mother. She said, I feel like I can do anything. So I released that same testimony over to you, that you would attach your faith to it and claim it as your own. God bless you.